Hey there, welcome to J Hutch Talks Too Much. This week we are talking about one of my favorite movies, The Night of the Hunter, and I'm here with my cousin, co-owner of several repertory cinemas throughout Southern Ontario. Actually, am I using that term correctly? Repertory cinemas, or are
Let's
they?
say independent.
Okay, let's say independent independent cinemas throughout Southern Ontario. Daniel Demois, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
Yeah, this is awesome. So, actually, a few weeks ago, I did a podcast on a movie called "I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang." Have you seen that movie? "I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang"?
No, I'm afraid I haven't. No.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it before. The first time I saw it was about 4 days before I did the podcast on it. But in that video, I talk about how on Letterboxd I have these two private lists. I have my favorite movie list, and I have my really favorite movie list.
Oh,
And my favorite movie list has 232 movies in it, and my really favorite movie list has about 75 in it. So all the movies I've talked about so far are in my favorite movie list, but only two movies are in my really favorite movie list. And the first was The Bicycle Thieves, and the second one is this one that we're doing today, The Night of the Hunter. So I'm really excited to talk about this. And I know because I saw on your list on Letterboxd that this is also one of your favorite movies.
Yeah, it is. Loved it for a long time. It's a great one. Yeah.
So, what is your experience with this movie? The first time I saw it was 2 years ago, and then I bought the DVD or the Blu-ray, and I haven't seen it since until just a few days ago. So, what's your sort of background with this movie?
My background is probably that I became familiar with it just by seeing photos initially of Robert Mitchum as the evil reverend or preacher. Just seeing the love-hate, seeing it referenced in other things, obviously like Do the Right Thing or other stuff like that. So I think probably I was familiar with it as a cultural, touchstone well before I saw it. And it was probably late teens, early 20s that I saw it for the first time. And I think I was probably slightly disappointed the first time I saw it because I maybe expected more of a, when you're young and you're watching horror movies, you kind of want to watch something that's going to be shocking. And I think it's interesting now to go back and watch it because I do find parts of it quite shocking for the time. But when I was younger, it didn't really necessarily have the effect that I was looking for, but it still stood out because there's something interesting and weird about it. And I would revisit it over the years, every few years, and every time I'd watch it, it would just grow in stature in my keep getting bumped up that list. And and now it's just something that is kind of like an annual something, or maybe every few years, something that I'll need to revisit.
That you bring up something that actually I wanted to ask you about because you are much more of a horror movie fan than I am. I tend to not really watch too many horror movies. But if you look at your list again on Letterboxd, it's full of a lot of horror films.
Yeah.
And mostly things that I haven't even heard of, I would say. Just because I feel like you have to be, I could be wrong about this, but I feel like you almost have to be in a horror movie world to hear about certain titles. And if you're not in that world, these titles just seem sort of foreign to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of it's like people who like science fiction. You know what I mean? You kind of gravitate towards the genre that you might love. And I studied horror in university quite a bit. I think I was surprised that there were even courses on horror films. I didn't know any of the writing that had been done in the 70s or 80s about horror movies, but the fact that there were courses about it made me think, oh, I should check this out. And then finding out that these movies actually had some kind of cultural significance or held a mirror up to society, I found that really interesting. So not that a lot of my favorites necessarily do that very successfully. Like at a certain point, you kind of, with your horror watching, you get to a point where you just like the vibe, you like the dreamscapes of it, not necessarily about the blood and the guts.
Right. Yeah. And actually, when you talk about dreamscapes, I feel like this movie probably contains perhaps a lot of those. But I will say, actually, I never even thought of this movie as a horror movie until I started reading about it. Like I watched it I thought that's an amazing movie. When I watched it again, like I said, I was just, I was in my late 30s when I watched it for the first time, and it immediately became one of my favorite movies. But I in my head, I didn't categorize it as a horror movie. And then you start to read about it, and a lot of people tend to categorize it that way. But I don't know why I didn't necessarily make that connection. Maybe my thinking about horror is very much a 1970s or 1980s horror aesthetic. I'm not sure, or the kind of 1930s Universal kind of horror, and it doesn't really fit comfortably into either of those categories.
No, and I think that's kind of well, yeah, like that's one of the interesting things about this movie is that it is so kind of hard to pigeonhole. Like you can't really say it's part of any genre. The horror aspect, I guess, really just does only come down to the fact that there's a killer on the loose who's trying to get these people, and it's kind of like like it's really not that far removed from Michael Myers chasing around Jamie Lee Curtis, or even the Terminator. You know what I mean? Like he's kind of this unstoppable thing that just keeps following them. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a something that is I wouldn't say it necessarily inspired those movies, but I think there's something in there where he's just kind of this menace, this evil menace that can keep coming and coming, and they
Yeah.
can't quite get away from him.
And and sort of a little bit like the Terminator, and a little bit like maybe a zombie movie to some degree.
Yeah.
I like the fact that Robert Mitchum's character, and maybe at some point we should kind of try to explain what the movie is about, but I do like how Robert Mitchum, the main character, Reverend Harry Powell, he moves very slowly. Like, I mean, this is there are some moments of kind of intense chasing, but a lot of I would say there's a chase sequence in the movie, and a lot of that chase sequence takes place either on the water, and through very slow moving water, not like some going over the rapids or anything like that. And with the kids who he's chasing are on the water, and then the chaser, Reverend Harry Powell, is on horseback. And that ultimately leads to actually one of my favorite lines in the whole movie, where the kids finally are trying to rest for the night, and they go into this like hayloft, and they climb up the ladder into the hayloft, and the boy looks out and he sees Robert Mitchum riding by on horseback, singing the song that he always sings. And the boy says, "Doesn't he ever sleep?"
Yeah, it's the
Which
best.
is a great line.
Yeah. No, and it's a great shot, and it's just like him in the background, like he's always out there. It's like it's a bad dream. You just can't escape.
Yeah, it
I love
doesn't.
it.
I could see from his perspective, the kid's perspective, this just does not make any sense. How could he be here? Like, we have come so far. And so in some ways, he's almost anticipating the audience response, which is like, this is crazy. There's no way he should still be this close to them.
Yeah, no, he's a menace. He's great. And yeah, and what a funny character too, the Robert Mitchum character. Like he's so all over the place too. And I was going to compare him to the way you said that. Just reminded me of, like, I don't know how familiar you are with old like cartoons. I'm not that familiar, but I've seen there's like a Droopy cartoon where he's like chasing after a criminal, and the criminal takes like an airplane, goes across the country, and Droopy's there waiting for him. He goes back and he's there waiting for him. It's kind of like, how is this possible?
Right.
And there is, I don't know why, but I've been thinking about the Mitchum character, and some people have commented on this, but it's interesting how he is such a menace, but there are moments of laughable, like buffoonery almost, like when he's screaming like an animal, or when he's like falling in the mud. There's just he's kind of, there's something not traditional about his villainy at times, because he's still fallible. He's still kind of a goof. Like he's still kind of just a man, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the movie, while it has some very real moments in it, it does nevertheless sort of exist in, to me anyways, I don't know if you agree, but it kind of exists in a sort of a fantasy world. Like the movie doesn't look like real life to me, at least. And Mitchum's character, it is kind of a fantasy in many ways as well, and is a bit cartoonish, like you say. And here I'm just going to skip right to something that happens at the end of the movie. But when he does get shot at, um, he does not react the way you would kind of expect a scary, murderous character to act. At least not even with the sort of reputation they've built up about him. Maybe he's killed. I mean, this is another kind of amusing part about it, as amusing as murder can get. But it's amusing in the sense that at the beginning he's like, "How many have I killed now? Have I killed 6? 12?" Yeah. Like, that's a big leap from 6 to 12. It's like, I could see maybe 6, or was it 7? But no, it's either 6 or 12.
Yeah,
he remembers them in multiples of 6 for some reason. And so that's kind of amusing. And then when he gets shot at the end, he screams like an animal and then like runs off like he's been like when the to give a real lowbrow reference, like when the bear gets shot in the great outdoors.
Yeah.
And just kind of runs off.
It reminds me. It always reminded me of Daffy Duck. Like I always think of Roger Rabbit when Daffy Duck is getting when he gets destroyed in the piano fight. I don't know if you remember that, but he makes a noise kind of similar to that, and again runs off like a pathetic little, like a nothing, and it's so funny.
And that's ultimately how he gets caught. Like, a spoiler alert, but that's ultimately. I mean, it's been how many years since this movie's been out, but but that is ultimately the end of his character at that point. He goes off and runs into the barn or whatever, and then the cops come and take him away, and that's it. Yeah. So it's almost an anticlimactic ending, although I think significantly that's not the end of the movie. It goes on for about another 10 minutes after that, but. And when there's a lot of stuff going on there, and I think a lot of stuff to talk about it. But like, what would you say is, before we really get into the movie and what it's about and all that stuff, why do you consider it to be a great movie?
For me, it's that it is so difficult to tie down, I guess, and it's the thing that you mentioned about how it is kind of like a fairy tale. Like I like things like that. I like when it's kind of takes something that is seemingly. I like things that seem like they're for kids almost, but are not. You know what I mean? I think that's fascinating, where you take like a children's story but make it for adults. Like he's the wicked stepfather. You know what I mean? And you've got Lillian Gish as the fairy godmother. You know, I think that stuff is very interesting, and I love movies from children's perspectives. Like, I don't feel like there's a lot of great films. Well, there's a handful, but I love that it's a film from a children's perspective that points out the issues of, like, the problems of adults. I love stuff like that. I love when adults are seen through children's eyes, and it brings to mind movies like, I guess, To Kill a Mockingbird, or I guess that's an obvious one because it's like another Southern film, or like I don't know, the James Mason movie Bigger Than Life is a good one, where I don't know if you've seen that, but the father's like, he's on medication and he becomes a threat to his son, and he turns into this kind of monster. And it's I just like movies like that. I like movies where kids realize. I like The Loss of Innocence, where kids realize that adults don't know everything. Adults don't have it covered, and they can in fact be putting you in danger, or they can be neglecting to help you. There's a lot of really inadequate adults in this movie.
Yeah.
Like almost all of them fail these kids, which I think is fascinating. So
yeah.
But the tone of it is fun, and it looks amazing, and it's so different, and it's like a first-time filmmaker, so he's kind of throwing everything at the wall, and I love that.
And we definitely need to talk about that first-time filmmaker, because it's also a last-time filmmaker. But
that's right. Yes.
But and that's significant. But I think that, you're absolutely right. There is this kind of like childlike quality to the movie, where it does sort of feel like it's like a children's movie gone wrong to some degree. And it starts off with that lullaby, which was written specifically for the movie, I think. Actually, it was something that I tried to record a few years ago, and still might actually do it, just because I find that opening song so sort of haunting, and actually really kind of beautiful, the way that they sing it. I'm
Yeah.
sure I could only mess it up with the way that I sing it. But
You could do a
nevertheless,
couple different octaves, couple, try to,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I'll try and get as high as I can. But
yeah,
it's that so it starts off with that. It's like, okay, kids, I'm putting you to sleep. But the song, the song is oh, the hunter in the night fills your heart with endless fright or something like that. Or
yeah.
and it is, it's like this is a precursor to a nightmare to some
Hmm.
degree, but it is like it's a song that's being sung to children, seemingly.
Hmm.
And but I think that you're right. Like I also really am a sucker from movies told from a child's perspective. I think maybe, and this is a movie that I would hold in even higher esteem than The Night of the Hunter. One of my all-time favorites, like top four favorite movies, is The 400 Blows,
Yeah.
which is definitely like that story of a child sort of confronting the realities of his world. That's a
Hmm.
much more realistic portrayal of it, I think.
Sure.
Although it's also French New Wavy, but it is much more sort of realistic. But the Night of the Hunter does have that kind of, there's an innocence to it in a way, but also sort of a deeply unsettling aspect to it.
Yeah, I love how unsettling it is. I just love that, like, I don't know how much plot I should get into, but it's like,
Yeah. Well,
I just,
let's maybe just say what the movie's about.
sure.
So it's Robert Mitchum plays. Um, do I start with that? Well, actually, the movie sort of starts with this.
Disembodied heads in space.
Oh yeah, I heard that's right. The disembodied heads. That's kind of also freaky when you think about it. While
It's
this
weird.
lullaby is going on, there are
Yeah.
these. It's like a proto Queen video going
Yeah.
on with these
Yeah, totally.
heads.
Totally.
And which is a great credit sequence, actually. One of the few great credit sequences from that time that's not done by
Saul Bass.
Saul
Yeah,
Bass.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's
exactly.
the only one I know.
Yeah, that's yeah, exactly. So okay, so after that though, there are these two kids who are playing. Their father comes. He's robbed a bank, right? I think in the book
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
gas station, but in the movie it's a bank. And he tells the son where he's hiding the money. Am I getting that right? Or does he
Yeah,
hide the money? So yeah,
yeah.
and then he gets taken by the police while
Mhm.
he's in jail before he gets hanged.
Yeah,
He meets the Robert Mitchum character, who is a charlatan, but he's posing as a reverend, and he's basically a lonely hearts killer, right? He goes and finds
yeah.
these widows and he kills them, 6 or 12. We later find out, and so he finds out about this family after the father is hanged for because he also kills two people at the bank as well, the father,
That's right.
right? And
Yeah,
so he goes and he marries the wife of the man who is played by Shelley Winters, who's great, I think,
yeah,
in the movie. And eventually, the money actually makes its way into the sister's doll. But he just wants to find out where the money is. The kids won't tell him. Eventually, he murders the wife, and the kids realize what's going on, and they escape. And there's again, it's for me one of the best sequences in film history, I would say, is this
yeah.
escape down the river. And
Mhm.
then they make it to Lillian Gish's home, and she basically brings in all these wayward children.
Yeah,
Um, Robert Mitchum shows up there. I'm skipping over a lot. But I'm giving
yeah,
you the most basic bits of it. She shoots him with a shotgun. He screams like an animal, goes into the barn, and then the cops come. They arrest him, and and they hang him too, basically. And
yeah. That's
and
basically it. Yeah. And there's a
that
Christmas scene at the end. Yeah,
Christmas scene at the end, yeah,
yeah.
which I had forgotten about. So when I was telling you this was my Halloween episode, and you brought up Christmas, I was like, Christmas, but yeah, there is. It ends with Christmas basically. So
Mhm.
Christmas at the Lillian Gish homestead,
That's
basically.
right. Yeah.
So that's the movie. One other thing that I do want to just point out, because Daniel mentioned it before, iconically, Mitchum has love written on the knuckles of one hand and hate written on the knuckles of others, which Spike Lee then uses in Do the Right Thing quite famously. So it goes back to this movie. But yeah, so I diverted away from what you were going to say there. But now that we have that out,
what was I going to say?
no,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
the flaws of the all the adults, I guess, and it starts right with and it's not just flaws. I think it's circumstances, I guess, and this seems to be Depression era.
Yeah.
And so we've got parents who are trying to do what they can to provide for their families, and they have to resort to crime, and inevitably ending up, leaving, having to leave their families. Then you've got the mother who's trying to do what she can to, again, make the family work, and she marries this murderer. Then you've got the drunk boatman who's like, come, I'll help you whenever you need anything. And as soon as they do come and they need help from him, he's wasted and terrified. He can't do anything. It just seems like it's just so interesting that these adults just keep failing these kids.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, like, will these kids, like, how do you get there? Like, the hangman is also an interesting one because he has clearly regrets about his job.
Yeah.
But then there's a scene where he's like looking at his kids and he's like, I have to do it to support my kids. You know what I mean? Like, it's all about people having to do these things that they don't necessarily want to, just to provide, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a theory about this, which I might lay on you a little bit later, but it might be too heavy to get into at this particular moment. But or I'm just weighing my options here in terms of what.
It's your ace. It's your ace, right?
Yeah, I might want to hold on to it. But back to the drunk guy who they go to when they're on the run from Mitchum.
Uncle Bertie, yeah.
Uncle Bertie, yeah. So, do you think that his reaction is a little bit outlandish to what's going on? Because what happens is the reason why he's drunk is because he finds the mother's dead body under the water, and actually I might do this now because I have some images from the show. Now I know that some people are not watching this; they're just listening to this. But again, I did want to provide some images because to me this is one of the greatest looking movies that I know of, and famously there's a picture of this image here. I was watching a interview with Guillermo del Toro, who said that he's spent most of his career trying to capture this image.
Yeah.
Which I think he does sort of almost in The Shape of Water. I feel like there's something like this in that movie.
Sure, yeah.
Does Uncle Bertie think that the cops are going to hold him responsible for her death?
Yeah, that's his logic is that he finds her in a car underneath his fishing boat. Well, it's not even where he lives. He's just out fishing on the pond.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess he's I don't know. I don't know if that it might be too far-fetched to suggest that speaks to the times where people just anybody can get blamed for anything, but or that everybody's so hard done by that you'll they need to pin it on somebody. I don't know if people were thinking that way back then, but it does seem a little bit unreasonable that instead of going to the police, he just gets drunk and the movie would have been cut pretty short, I guess. Yeah.
But you actually might you might have a point there when you say that, because you have at the end of the movie this mob that forms.
Yeah.
So I think that you're right there. That maybe Uncle Bertie's not too out of his mind to
it seems a bit unreasonable, though. I would agree. Like it seems kind of. Oh, come on, Uncle Bertie. You could really put this guy away right now. It would be pretty obvious what happened. And the reason, of course, that she's killed is because she finds out that the guy is just after the money, which is
Yeah.
such a sad moment for her.
Yeah.
And leads to like the most amazingly one of the more amazing moments in the visually of the
Yeah.
scene that like harkens back to like German expressionism and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, let's to go back to the image here. Um, let me see. I think I have something. So yeah,
Yeah,
that one in the top left.
yeah,
I don't know if you can see it, if people can see it all that clearly, but the one in the top left, it does. It's so let's maybe talk a little bit about the filmmaking for a second,
sure,
because
yeah,
so the movie is directed by a guy named Charles Lofton, who quite a famous British actor. I think he's British.
yeah,
Maybe he's British, right?
yeah,
But in many kind of American films and English films, and in 1955 gets this opportunity to make this movie. And one of the things he famously says, and I'm going to try and find the quote here quickly, is he says, "When I first went to the movies, they sat in their seats straight and leaned forward. Now they slump down with their heads back and eat candy and popcorn. I want them to sit up straight again." And I think that what he's referring to there is kind of the magic of did this go dark on us? Oh, or did I?
just the picture did,
All
yeah.
right. So I think what he's referring to there is silent film. What he would see is the magic of silent film, because I do know that the big influence, I think, on this movie was D.W. Griffith, from what
Yeah,
I understand,
right,
and that they would screen his movies. With that in mind, though, in that particular image that we just saw, um, I almost see that being a bit more cabinet of Dr. Caligari
yeah,
than D.W. Griffith.
no, definitely. And I don't know, I almost feel like I've read some people say exactly what you just said about his, like, I know that he was screening the films. I wonder if it was more of an obsession with Lillian Gish,
Yeah,
because she was in all the Griffith films,
yeah,
and so, and clearly appears, or she appears in this. So uh, a lot of the elements don't necessarily remind you of Griffith, like the close-ups of the animals and while they're on the river. Like it's a lot more fantastic for sure
yeah.
than some of his films. Um,
And actually, all the water too almost reminded me of Sunrise.
yeah, sure. The
Um,
Murnau film, yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, I didn't. To be perfectly honest, I've only seen one D.W. Griffith film, the most notorious one that exists.
Yep.
And personally, I'm not a fan of the movie, but
No.
people who have a greater understanding of film history might tell me that its techniques are quite strong. But
Right. That's right. Yeah.
but I'm
Some of
talking about
his smaller, has done some other movies that definitely have like interesting, like Lillian Gish out in the West, or out in like cold territories. Like I think
yeah,
that the nature aspects maybe of people walking among nature, but and I guess not using sound stages and stuff like that perhaps was interesting, but
yeah.
um, but certainly this movie is more ambitious in terms of its I don't know, in terms of some of the things it tried that make it a bit more dreamy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think it's interesting that he has that perspective, because I was just on a few weeks ago I was on another podcast called Movie Night Extravaganza, and we were talking about Sunset Boulevard, which is another
Yeah.
one of my favorite movies. And in that movie, you famously have the character Norma Desmond, saying, I'm still big. It's the movies that got small.
Hmm.
And I think that to a degree, I don't know if I would say it's fully doing this, but I think that to a degree, Billy Wilder, who makes that movie, would sort of agree with her in some way. That really sort of the great moment in cinematic history was the silent era, which is interesting to me in retrospect, because when I think of the golden age of cinema, I'm not thinking of the silent era. I think of it's the silent era and then it's the golden age. Not that there's not great silent films, but when I think of like, you know, big spotlights and the magic of movies, I think of things like Casablanca. I think of things like, you know, Treasure of the Sierra Madre and African Queen. I don't know why I'm exclusively naming Humphrey Bogart movies, but
well, it's Hollywood, right? Like that's kind of real Hollywood. That's what we think of when we think of Hollywood. Like you don't necessarily think of I don't know, like Charlie Chaplin, like going to the Oscars. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's like I think that the Hollywood, Hollywood is what seems like the great time of movies. And that's when there was still mystery around the actors, where like to get a peek inside their lives was like a treat. I think that's that's interesting.
And it's interesting that in the 1950s, you're already starting to see this, like, man, things were great back then.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. Well,
which is weird, but in terms of the look, like Night of the Hunter does strike me as one of the few American films from maybe, you know, it seems to me that like the 1960s, the late 1950s and early 60s foreign film movement really kind of shakes things up in terms of American cinema, in terms of how they deal with style. Right. But you have certain films before that do demonstrate a pretty good sense of style in their films. And I would say that Orson Welles is probably one of the filmmakers who shows that. And I would say that this movie is an excellent example of that. And I think it's interesting that both of those filmmakers struggled to make movies in this environment.
The cinematographer, I don't know if you saw this, but the cinematographer did Magnificent Ambersons, which of course was an even bigger flop, I guess, than this one was.
Yeah.
Because this was a flop, despite critics liking it. And I imagine that the style of it was part of that. People either probably thought it looked, I don't know. I guess the things that he was trying to do that were a callback or an homage or tribute to, you know, the era of cinema, the earlier era of cinema. I guess some people either didn't think it worked or didn't care, or were more interested in, you know, just watching Humphrey Bogart.
They didn't want to sit up in their seats.
No, they're comfortable with their popcorn.
Yeah.
But I think that's what makes it work, and that's why we're still talking about it, is because it is so different from everything at the time that it came out.
Yeah.
And it is such a weird mix. And again, you can't pin it down. Like everything else is so straightforward. Well, not everything, but this is something that definitely stands out because it's so different and off the wall.
Yeah. Now, unlike so Wells obviously gets to make more movies after Citizen Kane, but struggles to make more movies. And
all of them, all of them are.
Every single one is a struggle, and then has movies that he starts making and never finishes, or they come under extraordinary external control, like how the Magnificent Ambersons is recut, and I think The Stranger, which is actually one of my favorites, but not highly regarded amongst Wells fans, because I think they see it as his selling out film, I think, to some degree.
Yeah.
But but I like it.
No, it's entertaining, certainly.
Yeah. But I mean, I still see a lot of style in a movie like The Stranger, and but that movie is like, I think that was him trying to tell the studios, I could make a studio film. I can
play ball.
Yeah. I'll do anything you want.
Yeah.
Just give me a drink. But I think that so he struggles, but Charles Laughton never gets to make a movie again. Now I think he dies 7 years after this movie or something.
Yeah, like not that long after.
But it is crazy to think about. You know, you make a Citizen Kane or you make a Night of the Hunter, and you can't. It's difficult to make another movie after that, or impossible in the case of Charles Laughton.
And I think critics did like it. My understanding is that critics responded well to it, but I'm not sure if usually well, I'm not a filmmaker, but I assume that if you have the critics, you would hope that, oh well, at least somebody liked it. But I guess the studios, I don't know. I'm curious if it was his own, if it was him feeling defeated. Do you have any idea if he wanted to make other movies? I'm not really sure.
I don't know either. I guess I just assume that he would, because there's just so much craft put into this movie that it just strikes me that he was. This movie looks like a movie made by someone who was born to be a filmmaker, really, and the fact that it took him years to make it, and not that it was in the works for years, but it just took years in terms of his career to make a movie, and the fact that he never made one again. It's shocking. If it was any, most other kinds of movies, you could say, okay, well, he made a good movie and that was that. But this movie just seems like such a movie lover's film that it's just surprising that that was the only one he ever did.
I guess, the studios just didn't see dollar signs in the future for him. Yeah.
And same with Wells too, to a large degree.
Yeah, because Citizen Kane, was Citizen Kane even a success? I don't know that it made a lot of money, but anyway, I shouldn't have brought it up because I'm not sure of the answer.
I'm not sure either, but I think maybe the problem too with Citizen Kane is that, and just Wells in general, is that he was not afraid to like ruffle any feathers, and you're going after William Randolph Hearst and people like that. Like, there's he was probably a loose cannon. He was a loose cannon. I mean, I think that's pretty fair to say. So, I think just in general, they wanted to keep a tight rein on him. But I do see, although Citizen Kane and Night of the Hunter are two very different movies stylistically speaking, they're both extremely stylistic, I suppose. And sort of similar fates occurred to both of those.
Yeah, and the style is so interesting because like Lawton's so playful almost, which is weird. Like the source material, which I haven't read, but I know is based on a true story of a Lonely Hearts Killer. He might have even been called the Lonely Hearts Killer. I'm not sure, but and the name is very close. It's like Harry Powers, I think. But I think Lawton was concerned it would be too dark, so he adds all these little flourishes. Like you've got these cute little, like what do you call it when the screen goes like down on?
The iris shot.
Yeah, the iris shot of the
I only learned that from just reading about it for this movie.
Right, like the kids in the basement to show where they're hiding.
Yeah,
or you've got like the keyhole around when he's watching the dancer, I guess, when he's got the switchblade in his pocket and he flicks the blade, which is very an interesting moment.
We'll come back to that too, because I think what's
that.
We'll come back to that too.
No, but I think the style is so interesting. Like, and he's even got like a swipe. You know what I mean? Which kind of occurs.
Where's the swipe?
It's when it's in the scene we were just looking at, the murder scene, I guess. So right when he's coming down with the knife, and you see the close up of her face, and then swipe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's it's kind of interesting. And not that those are necessarily playful moments, but he's obviously having a bit of fun and trying different stylistic choices.
I see that you have this, right? This DVD.
Yeah, I do.
I just looked at the second disc, the supplementary disc, for the first time last night. Have you seen it?
Did you watch that? No, I intended to watch in advance of this, but the documentary.
Yeah, but it's a lot of it is documentary, but it's 2.5 hours long, and I didn't watch the whole thing, so I watched little bits of it. But there is an incredible amount of footage from just the filming of that movie. So so that it's worth it just for that. I didn't make it through the whole thing, but it's Charles Lawton sort of off screen. By the way, I watched that Guillermo del Toro interview where he keeps referring to Charles Lawton as Charles Laughton, and ever since that's how I've been saying his name.
That's funny.
And I know it's wrong, but I can't get myself out of saying it. But Charles Lawton is always the person, obviously, that's sort of off screen doing the lines for the person that's talking to them. There's also this weird moment in the outtakes where when the young boy sees his father being arrested and he kind of grabs his stomach.
Yeah, yeah.
That shot, the reason why is because before Lawton starts to do the scene, he flicks the kid in the stomach.
Oh, no
And
way.
the kid does that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I always thought that scene was so interesting, and then of course it happens. It gets reused at the end,
Yeah.
like as a framing device, I guess.
Yeah.
The hit in the stomach thing is it's an interesting moment. I'm not sure it quite works, but I like it. That's funny. It's too bad that he smacked that kid.
Yes. But it is that moment too at the end is another one of those really unsettling moments, because just to explain it, like when at the very beginning of the movie, when the boy sees his father being arrested by the police, it's actually to me a very real moment, because I think anybody, if you can kind of imagine what it would be like if you saw your
Yeah.
father being sort of pinned to the ground by these policemen and taken away.
Mhm.
His reaction to me strikes me as extremely real,
Mhm.
and true to life. But the interesting thing is that at the end of the movie, the same scene, the same moment plays out when they catch Harry Powell, and they tackle the cops, tackle him to the ground and arrest him in very much the same way. And the boy reacts the same way. He says the same thing, which is, what does he say? Don't, or
Yeah,
please
don't.
don't. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, that kind of feeds into that ace card that I have is has a tries to have a kind of an explanation for that as well.
Hmm.
Um, but it's almost maybe better not explained, because it's just such an odd thing that he has this emotional reaction to this guy who he doesn't even really know as a father figure, just really knows as this guy who's been chasing them for the most part. And they had a few months, I guess, where he was in their house treating them very badly.
Yes.
Um, but that's it. And he has that same reaction at the end of the movie.
Yeah. No, it is fascinating, and I'm not sure if it's because he's like flashing back to the moment, or if he's actually grown some kind of attachment, because maybe his previous father wasn't that great either. You know what I mean? We don't really see much about him, except we know that he murdered some people.
Right.
So
Which
there's no
doesn't sound
reason,
good.
there's no reason to believe that he was this great dad either. So maybe he has grown attached. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
I don't know. But no, it's kind of an interesting way to end it. Yeah.
I've been also trying to think of other movies where the look of the film fits the overall content so perfectly.
Mhm.
And I can only think of a few where movies that have a lot of sort of style to them, it's kind of in perfect combination with the content. Like, I would say Days of Heaven is another movie that's like
Mhm.
that. And I would say, what were the other ones that I was thinking of? 8.5 maybe is probably another one
Okay. Yeah.
that I would characterize that way. And this might be a bit of a stretch, but I might say a movie like Goodfellas also
Mhm.
has that same sort of pairing of style and content. Can you think of others that are so sort of stylistically different, but it fits the material so well?
I don't know. I guess it's kind of easy for me to think of like when I think of movies that have a unique style. I don't know why I thought of this, but I would think of like the movies of maybe Tim Burton or something like that, where
Yeah.
his movies are so uniquely his.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that would be an example of that. Not that I'm the biggest Tim Burton fan or anything. I like Pee Wee. I like Pee Wee's Big Adventure, and I like
Right.
Ed Wood. But yeah, I don't know.
It's interesting that you say that, because in the notes here for this book,
Yeah.
they say that it's something of Charles Laughton's The Nightmare Before Christmas, which is partly brings us back to our first conversation about this over text, which was
Halloween episode or Christmas episode kind of
yeah,
thing. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No, that is interesting.
yeah. Have you ever shown this movie at your theaters?
Yeah, I believe we have once, and I don't believe it did very well.
Yeah.
which is a shame. But since we've been talking about it, I was thinking we should play it again. I think it definitely doesn't play a lot. I think it probably gets played at Cinematheques around the country or North
Yeah.
America pretty regularly. But I think it's kind of a good one for the holidays, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
everybody's always looking for an alternative to regular horror stuff or to regular holiday type movies. And I think this would be a good one to throw in there. Kind of like a Die Hard or something like that, you know?
Yeah. I'd have to imagine this movie looks amazing on the big screen.
Yeah.
I don't like it's one that I feel like I would definitely have to see. And it might like I remember I've told you this before, I think that obviously I don't know if it's obvious to necessarily everybody, but we've talked about it before that
Mhm.
I'm a big Ingmar Bergman fan.
Yeah.
And I've always liked the movie Persona, but I would have never necessarily put it in my top 25 or anything like that, or top 30 favorite movies.
Right.
Not of Bergman. I mean,
Oh,
you
that's
could
what I
say the
thought you
same
were
thing.
getting at. I thought you were gonna say, wow. I was like, wow, not even top 25 Bergman. Wow.
No, it would have been in my top 10 Bergman, I would say at some point.
Yeah.
But but when you showed it at the Apollo for the when you were doing the Bergman 100-year
Yeah.
retrospective, you showed Persona there, and it changed the way I saw that movie.
Yeah.
And
The
it's
experiment,
amazing how just seeing a movie on the screen can change your whole perspective of it.
it's yeah, you can't escape, right? There's no that movie's a bit more experimental maybe, and maybe some of those things don't translate as well on the small screen.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, no, yeah, it's a fantastic film. Yeah, I would say most movies, obviously, I think that most movies need to be seen on the big screen, especially if that's how they were originally released. I would say that's although
right.
you could argue that seeing like some movie made by some B movie that played on the second half of a double bill that was made for very little, like some cheapo noir film. Maybe that doesn't need to be seen on the big screen as much as
Hmm.
the A film on that double bill. But anyway,
Yeah. But I would also imagine too that those audiences, or maybe those movies would be better seen with a larger audience.
yeah, probably. Yeah, it's kind of like watching a movie like from the oh my gosh, what do you call it? The in Shakespeare in the far
Oh,
seats,
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
balcony.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
it
yeah.
brings something else to it. Like
Mhm,
I think, uh, I'm talking about this because I know of your relationship to actual movie theaters, and
mhm,
you might remember this too. I don't know if you have this that sometimes I'll watch a movie now that I saw in a movie theater when I was 8.
mhm.
Okay, so we're going back some 32, 3 years at this point.
Yeah, sure.
And and I can when it gets to a point in the movie, I can still remember where, like, the audience laughed,
Mhm.
and I can still sort of almost hear that laugh, and
Yeah.
I feel like that's a kind that must suggest that there's sort of something significant about seeing these things with other people.
Yeah, the influence of those other people as well, because I'll watch movies and I'll remember people laughed at a joke and I'll still laugh at it
Yeah.
without even realizing if it's funny or not. You know what I
Right.
mean? And then you think about it after you're just like, wait, is that even a joke?
Yeah.
That's just an accent or something. Like it's not. It's funny. It's interesting what you respond to and how the nostalgia, I guess, plays into it.
Which is
Mhm.
actually what's weird is to go see a movie at a theater that you've seen before in the theater, and you're almost expecting it to hit the same points that it hit the
Yeah,
last time, and it doesn't.
yeah,
Um, that's always an unusual experience too.
yeah. Like if you went to see The Irishman twice or something like
Yeah.
that in that 2 week run, you're like,
People
oh,
did not laugh as much the second time
not at
during
the
the
end,
movie.
not in the whole.
No.
No.
I don't know. The first time I was sure it was like a slapstick comedy, but the
Yeah,
second
well,
time I
kind of
thought
with that crummy makeup or CGI. Anyway, we don't need to get into that. That's such an easy catch.
low-hanging
Right?
fruit.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Speaking of low-hanging fruit, actually, that brings me to to the to the
Nice.
big quote that I think kind of runs through this movie,
Mhm.
because it's right at the beginning. Um, and actually, I might just put it out there for now and just sort of leave it out there. But the movie sort of starts with this. line of ye shall know them by their fruits. It's a passage taken from the Bible. You shall know them by their fruits. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. And that's at the very beginning. And that quote, I think, is about well, I cut off the beginning of it because I think it's about like how do you tell a wolf in sheep's clothing or something like that, because the Robert Mitchum character is this fake, and but then later in the movie you get this line where Lillian Gish, who is the person who's taken in all the kids, says, if I got to find this quote again, says, "I'm a strong tree with branches for many birds."
Yeah.
And so you have another kind of reference to trees, and then she doesn't mention the fruit, but there is this like relationship between her and the young boy where she's constantly she asks him for an apple, and then he gives her an apple as the Christmas gift at the end of the movie. So I think we're kind of sort of meant to see this kind of relationship as she's like the good tree. She's like the one good tree in this movie.
Yes.
And I think that goes back to the point you're making about how there's no good positive adult characters in it, with the exception of Lillian Gish, I would say, and she's like she's the good tree to some extent.
Yeah, they're kind of like they're two sides of the same coin, right? Like she's the love and he's the hate that are on his hands, right? Like and they're both very religious. Like you could almost there's a lot in this movie that could be considered anti-religion even, like you've got like at the beginning when you're introduced to the murderous reverend, fake reverend, I assume, he's talking about, oh, you don't mind that killing, do you, Lord? You got a lot of killing in your book. Those people with their lacy, frilly things, like saying stuff like that. And like he's obviously the temptation is what drives him to kill, it seems. The fight. But she's obviously very religious as well, but she's almost using like they're singing the same song in the pivotal scene at the end.
That's right.
They both, and it's just one of them's using it for good and one for evil. And I think that there's I think you're right. Like she is she's the strong tree, he's the weak one. And I think it's interesting. I just thought of this before we started that and maybe this is just reading too much into it, but the mother's name is Willa, which sounds like the weeping willow. Kind of a floppy, weak tree.
Yeah. It, I don't know, which does speak to her character to some degree.
It's too bad. She is what an amazing sad character though. Like an impressionable.
Well, I don't think I wouldn't critique the movie for its representation of her, because I do think she's a really well written character. She's certainly weak, but she's understandably weak. I mean, it is the depression. She's just lost her husband. Mitchum is a silver-tongued devil to some degree, and so you completely understand why. And she doesn't want to get married to him. Actually, she's forced into it largely by the townsfolk.
Kind of, yeah. They're very suggestive. It's so heartbreaking. Like it all happens very quickly. That she, the moment like he makes her stare in the mirror when she wants to get in the same bed with him on their wedding night and do wedding night things. And he's like,
I know what you're talking about.
Look at yourself, you're disgusting. Apparently in the book, she's like naked and looking at herself, and she has to confess all her sins while she's staring at herself in the mirror.
Right.
Which just sounds, he just shames her, right? It's awful. And when she finally realizes that he's only in it for the money, when she overhears it, just the smile and like the shaking her head is so sad.
Yeah. And that look on her face when she's standing outside of the house and she can hear the way he's talking to her daughter is another sort of unsettling moment, because she doesn't look angry.
Yeah.
But again, the look is very real. And because I don't think she knows how to act in that moment.
No, she's surprised, and I think she's trapped. I think and I think she knows she's trapped, and then what happens. But But
so I want to. So one term that I see that is associated with this movie that I had to kind of look up. I feel maybe I should have known what this was, but I didn't. So I hear a lot of people refer to this movie as a version of a Southern Gothic.
Right.
So I looked up what it was, and I'm just going to read this out. This is not my wording. This is somebody else's. But so it says that the Southern Gothic brings to light, and as you're hearing this, let me know if you think that this applies to the movie. The Southern Gothic brings to light the extent to which the idyllic vision of the pastoral agrarian South rests on massive repressions of the region's historical realities: slavery, racism, and patriarchy. Southern Gothic texts also mark a Freudian return of the repressed. The region's historical realities take concrete forms in the shape of ghosts that highlight all that has been unsaid in the official version of Southern history. And sorry for the long quote, but I just want to read out one other part. What critics do seem to agree on is the way in which American Gothic texts in general have challenged the American dream narrative by consistently pointing out limitations and aberrations in the progressive belief in possibility and mobility. One question I have is, do you think it's pointing out the region's historical realities of slavery and racism? I myself am skeptical because I don't think there's a single person of color in this movie.
No, I would say it's certainly focused on the hard times that that these people went through, but no, I don't see there's nothing to indicate that there's any reflection of that at all. I wouldn't think. I think it's pretty shallow, I would say, shallow water in terms of how deep it might be digging into even the troubles of the people. Like, it's kind of like, oh, these people are hard done by. They have to do things to make ends meet. But you don't really get any indication of why they're there. Like, I guess you just get a general, oh, this is the Depression. Everybody's got it tough. That's kind of what I would say. Yeah.
Now that might be kind of one sort of potential flaw of the movie, because it is odd. It is odd to me that there's only white people in this movie, particularly since it is, you could, watch most movies from that time. There will be plenty, they're not good representations, generally speaking, but so maybe it's better. I don't know. I don't know.
No, it's surprising for sure that there's, but no, sorry, it's not surprising.
Right.
Like, it's not surprising, but it certainly, there would have been some interesting, could have done something interesting there, certainly.
Yeah.
But I don't think, in terms of that definition, I don't think that there's a lot of these characters are being haunted by the sins of the father, that kind of thing. I don't see a lot of that.
Certainly, I don't think in terms of race, but what do you think about the patriarchy part of it? Because I do think that, one of the things, for one, we talked a little bit about Mitchum's character as being sort of cartoonish. And part of him strikes me as a little bit like, he does almost seem out of time. Like, he seems potentially like a kind of, this isn't a Southern example, but kind of almost like a Salem witch trial sort of like Puritan sort of preacher to some degree.
Yeah, definitely.
So and clearly that kind of misogyny or hatred of women is at work with that character.
For sure, which is interesting also, because, sorry, I don't want to derail what you're
No.
But that's such an important thing for horror movies as well. Like, the knife, you know what I mean? Like the slasher, like, what does the switchblade represent? You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's so much of horror films are about, not being able to, oh boy, what am I getting at? Like, the knife and the slasher is like Halloween, and the taking away of female agency and stuff like that. And I think that is clearly him. Like, he can't come to terms with the temptation, his desires, the earthly desires of men. You know? And that's and
he blames those desires on women, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean,
his lack of control of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you and I think, your question of what does the switchblade represent? I mean,
Yeah.
that's where I think we get to that scene in the dance club where
Yeah.
it's made pretty explicit, I think,
Yes. Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
means. Just to illustrate the point. Actually, I do think, from what I understand. So, well, I'll just explain how it is in the movie that he's watching this lady, dance on stage, and uh, and then he flicks his switchblade, which comes through his jacket. Um, Originally, I think it was actually supposed to come out through his pants pocket.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe that was a little too explicit for the
Not
censors at the
not too
time.
subtle. Yeah.
No, but the point is made, right? And
Yes. Certainly.
and so there is that, and then you get the line about basically he has convinced his wife to believe she's unclean, and how
Yeah.
he can purify her,
Mhm.
and he's a lonely hearts killer, so his victims are always women.
Mhm.
And but again, I think it's amazing, or noteworthy, that the person who nabs him at the end is Lillian Gish, um, and um, largely in a house that's mostly populated with young girls, from what I can see. Is that boy who escapes? Is he the only boy there? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. And I guess she's missing her son or her nephew or something, or grandson. But so there was a boy there prior. But yeah, I think at the time, yeah. And who is fooled by this guy is maybe interesting as well, because it is largely adults that are fooled by him, with the exception of the Lillian Gish character. But
Hmm.
I guess she's an old, no, well, she's probably the same age as the shopkeeper who
Hmm.
who is all about how the handsome reverend has come to town at the time.
Icy spoon.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I've been married 40 years. All I care about is my canning. Like that. That's like one of the best moments. That's a good funny moment. And
That is a good funny moment.
her husband just kind of like, yeah, is emasculated. Yeah,
She's right.
yeah, yeah.
She's definitely right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, she's probably the same age. So were you
I
suggesting that
was
maybe Rich?
I was just saying that it's interesting that the kids all kind of know he's not a great guy. And
The only exception to that, though, is Ruby.
but I guess she's on the
She's
cusp.
older.
She's at the point where she maybe is interested in the attention of that he's giving her.
Yeah.
Whereas, so I think it's kind of one of those moments where the youth are maybe a bit wiser,
Hmm.
and maybe just social niceties get in the way of what may or may not be a dangerous situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, absolutely. So now, the only thing really about that Southern Gothic quote that I guess that made sort of some sense to me was this idea of the patriarchal element of it,
Yeah.
but also just about how these kind of historical aberrations, or this historical violence, let's say, tends to repeat itself through time, and we keep
Mhm.
getting some reminders of it. And I wonder if that can sort of tie back to this idea of the children in the tree metaphor and all that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
because we do get so many references to the treatment of children in during this Great Depression time. There's the scene where the kids come to the woman's door
Yeah.
to get food, and then she sends them away.
Mhm.
um and also, there's the quote from Lillian Gish when she's talking about biblical times, and she says things like, uh it did seem like it was the plague time for little ones, those them olden days, those hard times. But I think that to some degree we're supposed to see that as the same as these times. They seem exactly the
Yeah,
same.
it's a hard world for little things. Like
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
that's a big line, and which was later used in Raising Arizona as well, which is kind of an interesting tribute there. But the uh, the patriarchal stuff, I think, yeah, it makes perfect sense because the men in this film are obviously, for the most part, in control and not necessarily doing a very good job. Like it's you all the male characters in this are deeply flawed,
Hmm.
and you get the impression that with parents like these, how are things going to change? And I
Right.
guess and that's why the Lillian Gish character is so interesting, because she is this strong oak who's actually, gonna, like, her views may be not mine, but she's gonna raise these kids up to be respectable, and
Hmm.
and not like, she's kind of the only chance that these kids have to not turn out like all the men in this film,
Hmm.
because you've got just a bunch of murderers. Even the good one is, as I said, like a hangman.
Yeah.
So the most admirable guy in this movie is the hangman, probably, or the shopkeeper's husband, who is kind of almost just comic relief, I would say. But yeah.
Yeah. A
Mhm.
bad tree produces evil fruit, and it's
Yeah.
like it's just going to keep going and going and going, right?
Yeah.
Until some good tree comes along, basically. It
Yeah.
reminds me actually of, here's another sort of maybe low art reference, but I was watching an interview with Noel Gallagher once, and
Uh-huh.
he was talking about how, his father was abusive, and the interviewer, it's kind of a weird question to ask, but the interviewer said something like, "Well, you know how a lot of children are abused, go on to be abusers themselves, but you seem to be such a good father. Um,
Jesus.
can you?" It's a weird question,
Yeah.
but he was like, "Well, he's like, my father probably abused me because his father abused him," and he says, but he says it's somebody's got to draw the line somewhere. He said, and
Yeah.
it's I've decided it's going to be with me, and which is it's a great kind of way of thinking about it, I think, and I think that is, I think, kind of at work in that sort of that metaphor of the tree, right? And also with this idea that historical violence repeats and repeats and repeats.
Mhm.
Um, and Maggie's here in the chat.
Oh, hi, Maggie.
Yeah, how you doing? Thanks for watching. That historical violence does have this sort of tendency of repeating until somebody comes along and stops it, and that, I think, is the Lillian Gish character, right? She's
Yes,
there to stop it,
that's
and that's
right.
what
Yeah.
makes the boy character so fascinating as well,
Right.
because he could be next in line. Like he, if not for her, what would he have turned out to be?
Yeah, and I guess could he still, like, I guess we're supposed to think no. But the this yeah, let's just assume it's going to be a happy ending for him. Yeah.
Well, that's also one of the reasons why it's interesting that this movie is set in the Great Depression, because I mean, we'll say it's the 1930s.
Mhm.
This movie is 1955. The book comes out in 1953. So
Mhm.
if this kid was real, he would have been, in his early 30s or something at the time that this movie is coming out.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's now an adult male. And I think it does kind of make us ask, what is going on with this? What would be going on with this guy right now?
Yeah. I have to assume that he's been saved, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's hope.
Yeah.
Although if she keeps singing him that song, that lullaby every night, I don't know.
Yeah, and she's not really teaching him many good lessons by saying an apple is an acceptable Christmas present. Like
It
that.
is the depression after all.
Like, you're not getting
There's
any points next year, let me tell you.
she's also not particularly good at hiding what he's gonna get. Because remember, the guy at the courtroom says, "What's he gonna get for Christmas?"
Oh,
And
that's
she,
right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's pretty obvious at that point what he's
Yeah,
gonna get.
yeah. That courtroom scene is interesting. I always forgot that there was an angry mob at the end of that film, and I think that's kind of funny. Everybody's, and I guess that also ties into what you were saying, what we're talking about in terms of the way things are run, the patriarchal influence. Like, even an angry mob will bust out just because violence has become the way of things. Everybody's quick to violence,
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of a fascinating. I don't know. That is kind of interesting. Are these people better than our murderer? I don't know. You kind
yeah.
of like see him running sheepishly away from them, and that's kind of interesting.
Well, it's reminiscent of another violent. Sorry, not another violent. Well, another similar kind of movie. Also, just after the silent film, but it reminds the silent film era. M kind of does remind me a
Right,
little bit of M.
right, yeah. With that great court scene, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. We've got Maggie here saying Lillian Gish is such a powerhouse in the film. the first person that made me feel safe.
Hmm.
I take that personally. I don't know about you, Daniel.
Yeah, I'm a strong oak.
But it's true. She is a safe haven, definitely, in that.
No, such a great scene where she's like rocking in her rocking chair with the rifle. Just like
Yeah,
she's a Terminator herself, right? She doesn't
that's
need
right.
sleep either. It really is there it is.
Yeah, I don't know if I can get a good shot of it, but it is the cover of this, which or the booklet anyway, that
Yeah.
it is kind of again maybe the most iconic shot of the film, of her
Hmm.
rocking chair.
Hmm.
Maggie says, in the film, my God. There we go. So, all right, fine, that's fine. Um, so, and okay, what anything else? What about the other song in the movie? What about the little girl who sings that? We haven't really talked about her. I thought she was just in my head. I thought, is she related to Robert Mitchum? Because she looks like Robert Mitchum a
Yeah,
lot.
they have a similar face, eh? Like I love when he calls her, "You poor, silly, disgusting little wretch." That's one of my favorite parts. It's it's so intense, and
Yeah.
but yeah, what is the song she sings in the boat? I I forget.
I can't remember either. All I know is it's appropriate. Like the content is appropriate for whatever it is they're going through.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak. I think it
Yeah.
sounds pretty bleak. Yeah. No, yeah. Well, no, she's a funny character. Mitchum is just so good too. Like he really goes after those kids. It's great. You really believe that he's going to hurt those children.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I think that this might be one of the great actor and one of the great performances in film.
Yeah,
I would rank it up there pretty high.
and it's so different for him. Everybody in this is great. Like I wouldn't consider myself a Shelley Winters fan. I didn't. I've seen her in many movies. Most of them probably more B films, like movies where like there's a giant octopus or something. But I think that she's terrific in this. Like, and I
Right.
never really realized how great she can be. But Mitchum is also great and also very different than I think he maybe was known for at the time, where he would play just tough guys. And he's still kind of a tough guy here, but again, we've kind of gone over it. Like he's kind of a caricature a little bit at times as well, which is fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think just for the line alone, and he does this line so cartoonishly, where he's outside of the house and he goes, "Children,
Yeah.
children."
Yeah.
That alone makes it such a great performance. But
Are you being impudent? Are you being impudent, children?
and he often does. It looks like he's really enjoying the performance because he has a kind of smirk on his face a lot.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know if it's the very first time we see him in the movie. It might be where he's they're in the jail. Oh no, it's not the first time we see him in the movie, because the first time we see him, he's driving along in
In the car.
car.
Yeah.
But when we see him in jail and he pops from the bunk.
Yeah, and his hair's down.
Yeah.
It's like a slapstick. It's like it is like a silent moment. It's almost like Stan Laurel or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great moment. Is he the killer in Cape Fear?
Yes.
Okay,
And
I haven't seen the original Cape Fear.
Yeah, and he shows up in the remake as well. I
Yes.
think. Or I think he does. I know Gregory Peck does. Yeah.
He did. Now you got me.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. I'm gonna look this up.
I love when he's like telling his lies too, and he's like, she run off with a drummer." It's like what?
Oh yeah, she run off with the drummer. Well, you know what? When it's a story that's that ridiculous, it seems like it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says that in the little cafe there, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Robert Mitchum is in the remake. He plays Lieutenant Elgart.
Okay.
Also in Scrooged. I think that was the first time I ever saw Robert Mitchum.
That's right. He's the station manager who wants them to play programming for cats or dogs. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So what a career.
Yeah. Classic.
Yeah. but I can't remember why. Oh yeah, but that makes me think, because I don't know what his performance was like in Cape Fear, but and here I'm going to spoil another movie for everybody out there. In the Scorsese version of Cape Fear, when the De Niro character, who is playing the murderer in that, dies at the end, gives off this really crazy scream
Mm.
as well. I don't know if you remember it, but
It's been a few years. I've seen it in the last 10, but yeah.
right. It's again, it's a very sort of similar moment. I wonder if, I know Scorsese puts Night of the Hunter on his favorite movie list, so
Yeah.
I wonder if it's a bit of a nod to
Well,
that, or if it was just in Cape Fear. I'm not
well,
sure.
he's so over the top too. That whole movie, like he's
Yeah,
like that's a really funny performance, and
yeah,
still manages to be threatening. Um, but him like laughing in the theater with his giant cigar, and like there's a lot of great stuff in that movie.
yeah.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't. I would Now we're off on another movie. I wouldn't put Cape Fear up there. It's not one of my favorite Scorsese movies, I don't think. Would you say it's one of yours?
Uh, no, but I've gotten less interested in Scorsese as I've gotten older, I guess. But so I'm kind of, I stick to Mean Streets and Taxi Driver. So
Right.
if I was gonna rewatch one though, I would probably be more likely to watch Cape Fear than I would be to watch Raging Bull, to be honest, right now.
Interesting.
Not
That's
because I like
interesting.
it better, just because it's more fun. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
I remember you saying that a few years ago. It was right out here. You said that you were kind of getting over Scorsese a little bit.
Yeah, like I think I don't know, maybe a little too flashy for me these days, perhaps.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's fair
Yeah.
enough. That's fair enough. So, I don't know. Maybe we should wrap things up soon,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'd love to hear any other thoughts that you have about the movie before we do. But
Um, I don't know. I'm curious. Do you think there is any anti-religious stuff in here? Do you think there's anything I think, I guess it's in the book as well. But like knowing that I believe Lawton like had like a childhood where he was like involved in the church. I feel like he obviously, maybe not obviously, like I think he had, I believe he's bisexual as well, or that was at least suggested. Although,
Mhm.
so I wonder if part of this is like a skewering of the church at times, or maybe it's just a little bit of subtle like ribbing, but but certainly there are some moments that critique the Bible and critique these God-fearing folk who are, you know, not really doing their part to make sure that these kids are safe.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's something that I thought was kind of interesting, but I don't know if it's just kind of circumstantial as well.
No, I don't think so. I think it's actually a significant aspect of the movie.
Mm.
First, I don't think you can have a character
Yeah,
who who is a reverend like that and it not be significant. And I think that your observation about the two characters at the end, one evil, one good,
yeah,
Lillian Gish and Robert Mitchum singing the exact same song.
yeah,
I mean, that's such a significant moment. There's something significant going on there.
yeah,
I think that I would say that the movie is probably coming down on sort of Old Testament sort
yeah,
of Christianity, or the Old Testament version of, because when Robert Mitchum says, has that conversation with God, um, he's not entirely wrong if he's talking to the Old Testament God.
right. I guess yeah, and I guess so I guess it comes down to it's anti-fanatic, I suppose.
Yeah, there's an
Yeah,
anti-fanaticism. I think maybe an anti sort of Puritanism, maybe
yeah,
kind of a thing.
right.
Um, but I think it's countering that with the kind of expression of religion that Lillian Gish is expressing,
Right.
um, which is a much more kind of loving and caring. She still threatens them with the switch.
She threatens them with the switch, yes, but she does give Ruby a brooch, which is a shiny thing, right? So I think that's kind of interesting. There is some kind of a, she realizes that she's maybe a bit more modern than he is. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
Because of the brooch, you know.
The brooch can count for so many things, I think.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
you know, and all she got was an apple.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, and he got the watch. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that we didn't really talk about the religious angle too much, but I think it's a really important aspect of the
Yeah,
movie,
for sure.
and I do think that to some degrees he is paralleling the two different kinds of expressions of. Do you think that like Lillian Gish says you're not an actual reverend? Um, do you think that is that true, or do you think that he's just an evil preacher, or is he
Yeah,
just
I think
phony the
he's
whole time?
I think he's somebody who's like I think he's self-ordained, I would guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Did you have what was your theory about the ending? Did you share that with the mirroring of the
Right, the opening and
yeah.
the hold on a second. I think it did sort of relate a little bit into what I was saying, but
Okay, sorry.
okay, here's what I wrote down. This is gonna sound. I wrote this as just a note to myself.
Mhm.
So, and I'll just read it out because I kind of forget what my point was. So, forgive me if this sounds really heavy-handed, but I said that this is in line with this idea of the Southern Gothic. But the South is haunted, and the children suffer as a result of the injustices of the past and the present, like the Great Depression, which they are haunted by.
Hmm.
Um, the Puritanism. There's a Salem witch trial, a Scarlet Letter style to Mitchum's character. The
Yep.
tree, a corrupt tree, will only bring forth evil fruit. So try as they might, they can't bring up good fruit because the people are still so desperate. The father means well, but he can only save his children by robbing a bank and killing people.
Right.
And which is all things that you observed as well. But I think that in some ways, like the father does mean well, but
Yeah.
ultimately ends up doing just as bad, or he may not kill as many people, but he still kills a couple of people,
Yeah.
and he robs money, and it's an environment in which people really, for the most part, can only largely are just compelled to do bad things.
Mhm.
And so when he sees his father being attacked by the police, he has that reaction, and when he sees Mitchum's character being attacked, it is kind of sort of maybe the same thing to him. It's just another person who has looked after them, who's done bad things, who's being attacked.
Well, yeah, and I guess if even though they are lousy father figures, they're the only father figures that he's had. So yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, he doesn't know how to feel, I guess, or
yeah,
how. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. So it's a disturbing thought, really, when you
Yeah.
think about it.
Right.
But I think that's certainly at work, and then does once again sort of demonstrate how crucial that Lillian Gish character
Yes.
will be or can be to the kids. But
Yeah.
then there's only so many Lillian Gish characters out there.
Yeah. I'm still looking, or maybe I'll just take it on myself. I don't know.
Yes, there you go.
Start
There you
growing my hair a little bit longer, and get
Sure.
myself a shotgun.
Get yourself a shotgun, open up your house for wayward kids. I don't think you could do that in this day and
You
age.
got to stock up on brooches and apples. That's the only thing. Yeah.
No, don't get the apples. They get you the apples. That's the deal. But actually, sorry, I will end this in just a second, I promise. But to actually bring these sort of strands together in terms of what we've just been talking about, the apple obviously plays a big um, role in biblical
Yep.
iconography. Uh, do you think there's? I really don't have an answer to this at all. But do you think that there's something that's going on there?
Who takes a bite of the apple? At some point, someone takes a bite of the apple, and it's very significant. It might be him,
I think it's him. Yeah.
but there's lots of biblical, like beyond just the going down the river. Obviously, they reference it with talking about Moses, and they talk about
Moses and the bulrushes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But the fact that he's giving the apple to her is kind of reverses it. Like I would think, I'm probably missing something big that I should know.
I think I am too.
Having been sent to a Catholic school, I should probably like. Obviously, there's the Garden of Eden,
Yeah.
and eating from the tree of knowledge, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but the apple has a negative connotation there. So
Yeah.
In that scenario. So,
and in the context of kind of what we've laid out too, you'd figure when he bites the apple, that's also a bad thing, because it's really the children who are able to see evil.
Yeah.
And so if he eats the apple, is he no longer able to? I don't know.
But we're talking about trees here too, so maybe it's an apple from a good tree.
There you go.
It's the strong
There
tree.
you go.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And
Yeah.
I suppose maybe the fact that he gives her an apple is maybe that kind of symbolic sign that he's become a good tree that can bear good fruit.
I'll buy that. Okay.
What a positive way to finish this off.
A Christmas miracle.
It sure is. Or a Halloween miracle, depending on how you read the film. So with that in mind, do you want to plug anything before we head off?
Yeah. Well, hey, if you're if anybody's in Ottawa, check out the Bytown Cinema. We've got lots of interesting movies playing. Bytown Cinema, Apollo Cinema in Kitchener, Fox Theatre in Toronto. We play lots of new movies, but we also play some older genre films, older classics like this one we've been talking about today.
Yeah, it's a great. The two that I've been to, I haven't been to the one in Ottawa, but the two that I've been to are fantastic. So I endorse that as well. So thank you, Daniel, for coming on. I hope you come on again sometime.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll talk about something that'll make you squeamish next time. Something that'll get you into the horror zone. But I'd be happy to talk about anything. Yeah, anytime. I do want
to start doing. I had this idea a few weeks ago where I'm kind of one of the goals with the channel is to try to sort of introduce things that are often a little bit offbeat, or maybe no longer as popular as they once were, or maybe were never popular at all. Because I think on some level, if people did experience them, they might actually enjoy them. But Gina told me you should have people do that to you as well. So have some people come on and introduce you to things that they really like. So
yeah, that's a fun idea.
So that if you want to introduce me to one of your horror movies, although I'm very bad at it. I watched Black Christmas last year.
Did you not like Black Christmas?
It's not that I don't like it. It's just hard for me. It's very hard for me to watch those kinds of movies. I liked how Toronto centric it was.
Yeah, a lot of U of T in there. Yeah,
a lot of U of T, just random sort of streets. I like that.
The language on those phone calls, though, appalling. those prank calls.
Oh yeah, the calls. I forgot about that.
Disgusting.
What these kids get up to nowadays, but I just when I do get nervous, especially in a more, I shouldn't say a more contemporary movie, because that movie was made years before I was born, but more contemporary than The Night of the Hunter. I just get very nervous when I think somebody's about to get brutally murdered.
Yeah, well, I think that's the idea, but
I suppose so.
But I can understand not getting joy out of that. That I don't know that you're supposed. That's fair.
But I think it is kind of like, it's like the feeling you get before going on a really scary roller coaster or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. I think that is what it is. Yeah. For a lot of people, or just seeing, like, when you've seen enough, it's just wanting to see how they change it. You know what I mean? It's like, if you've heard enough pop songs, but to hear a new one that changes something a little bit, or hearing a cover of a song. Actually, it's more like covers. It's more like covers, because so many horror movies are the same thing over and over again. But to see something a little bit different, if they do something a little bit different with the guitar solo, then that's what it's all about.
It's worth it. Yes. Yeah. I did start watching the Universal horror movies.
Oh, those are the best. They're great. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very good. They're very good. We watched Bride of Frankenstein a few nights ago. Really like that one.
That's got some humor to it.
It does. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great.
Well, with that in mind, thank you so much for coming on. And like I say, I hope you do come on again. And
love to.
For those of you who are still with us, or who have made it all the way to the end, and you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please subscribe. You'll get wonderful content like you've seen tonight. There's my plug for myself. So thank you so much. Have a good night. Take care.
Thanks,
Bye bye.
Jesse. Bye.
Thank you.